I'm almost 50, strong, clear, energized. Training hard, living clean, fully alive. But it didn't start here. 30 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and I felt hopeless. But I chose a different path. No meds, just science, discipline, and results. Now I'm symptom-free and asking the tough questions that move us all forward. This is Hope and Health. Let's go. Hello and welcome to Hope and Health. I'm Mathew Embry, and today we're talking to Trevor Wicken, founder of the MS Gym, one of the world's largest platforms for people living with multiple sclerosis for movement and mindset. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and I've been following you for a while as I've been in the game with you, and it's just cool to see another guy just out here trying to serve people that are struggling with chronic illness, disability, hope, all of it, man. So it's just cool to partner with you and be here and just have a conversation together.
That's awesome. Now, I'm not shy about telling people this, but when it comes to fitness, I am not a fitness expert. I do not pretend that I can give fitness advice. And even though exercise has been a major part of my program for almost 30 years, I still don't know what I'm doing in a lot of ways. So I'm hoping that this interview can really help the people who reach out to us looking for that fitness advice. So to get into it, how on earth did you get into working with people with multiple sclerosis?
Well, first of all, man, I just want to thank you for being humble and actually transparent. The fact that you're like, this isn't my wheelhouse, this isn't my scope, so I'm actually looking for experts, because a lot of people think exercise is just so easy that you just check it out on YouTube and you just do your thing. But exercise isn't so simple that you can't screw it up, or that you can't select the wrong type of exercise. It's really not going to get you the results that you're looking for, which ends up being really disappointing. It ends up being really disheartening and discouraging. My road started back, honestly, in high school. I was a football player, and I messed up my back pretty bad. And I had 3 different surgeons tell me that I needed to have my spine fused at 16 years old. And my dad was like, that's just not going to happen. So I actually went just through coincidence, and my mom knew a guy who was a neuromuscular therapist, and he rehab people through movement. And so I went into him, and he did an analysis on me, and he looked at me and be like, hey, here's what's going on. These muscles are out of balance. These joints are out of balance. Well, this is what's happening in your brain. You're training really well this way, but these things are weak. So you have a ton of imbalance, which is why your back is messed up. And I was like, I walked out of the first day and be like, this is what I want to do. If movement broke me, then movement should heal me. And it just made sense to me at 16 years old. And so I started studying neurology. I started studying anatomy and physiology in high school. And then, I got my degrees and all that kind of stuff. And so after I graduated, got my master's degree and everything, I started working with athletes, and I started really diving into the biomechanics of things.
I hate to interrupt and stop you, but before you went down that educational path, what happened to you? Were you able to solve some of the problems you were dealing with?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was crazy, man. These physicians wanted to fuse my spine. I was taking about 12 to 14 Advil a day. I was in so much pain. And this guy, Dale Greenwald, within about 2 months, I was squatting again, I was deadlifting again, I was running again, I was swimming again. And I was to the point where I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna be able to play sports again. And so I fell in love with it. And through school, I just kept doing what he was doing and kept using my education through my undergrad and graduate degrees to apply that to my programming. And I healed a bum shoulder, I healed my back, I got my wrists better, my knees better, and I just started to feel really, really good. So I fell in love with the power of movement, right?
Interesting. So what was it like for yourself to be able to take control of your own health? You had specialists telling you one thing, you were looking at surgery, but then you went a different way, but then turned your whole life around.
Mm-hmm. It was empowering. The fact where you can actually partner with the body God gave you, and you're just like, hey man, I feel like I'm in control again. I feel like I'm not a prisoner to my body. I feel like my body's not broken. I can actually use this vehicle that I've been given. There was a sense of strength. There was a sense of peace. There was a sense of empowerment and confidence that was built up, where I wasn't just a victim to the system and the experts that were telling me that I was broken. I was actually had ownership over my body again. and it gave me back a lot of personal power, which was really cool, which is what I try to talk to people in the MS gym about.
Now, I'm really interested in this. So you went from, you were playing football. That was your core sport.
Yeah, football and swimming. It's like two opposite sports, but
yeah. Now, did you transition to more of an individual like approach to athletics at that point?
Yeah, my coaches were breaking me. I mean, they were like not understanding what was going on. They just tried to keep pushing me harder and force feeding movement into my system that just wasn't healthy for it. And so I kind of rebelled, to be honest, and I kind of started to do my own thing, and I got better. Right. And they weren't a fan of that, but I was like, look, I'm still performing. I'm still kicking butt. So like, what's your problem?
I do notice in today's world, there's so much focus on youth and team sports. And do you think maybe we've gone a bit too far and we've lost sense of the individual in that, and like the idea or the skills it takes to start developing as an athlete individually and taking care of one's body outside of the structure of team sports, so someone can learn to do it by themselves?
From a neurologic standpoint, it's not good to just pick one sport so young, because your brain and your nervous system have so much more room to grow and develop and explore movement that you don't want to get locked into one pattern, because pattern overload is where injury happens. And there is a rise in the research talking about the kids that specialize in sports too young end up with some pretty severe structural issues, injuries, and everything else later in life, because their body and their nervous system are not as diversified as they need to be. And so the nervous system doesn't know how to actually adapt when it needs to, because it's been so programmed one way during these crucial growing and development years.
I believe that. And I also think that there's a lack of skills that people start to develop in regards to how do I get myself motivated to be exercising by myself outside of those systems where there's a coach and a whole team around you. Like, what does it take for me to maintain my health by myself without that external motivation?
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's not a lot of education from the coaches, because a lot of them, they're never encouraged to do that. It's like they just show up, train the kids, and everybody goes home and that's it. But to really promote health and wellness and like vitality and, nutrition and safe supplementation if they need it, or just finding that autonomy in your body and that autonomy to choose the path that you want, is not encouraged. It becomes this herd mentality instead of let's develop these group of individuals to play together stronger as a team. It's what the team does is what all of us do, and then that you lose that individualism.
All right, so to recap, you've had a back injury, you're a football player, you're a swimmer. Through movement and fitness and your own education and your own like self-education, taking control of your own body, you heal yourself. You go to university, you start studying all this stuff. Now, what motivates you to take this to the world, to take it to other people?
So as I work through my end of my undergrad into my graduate programs, I was referred by two different neurology clinics up in northern Colorado, and they sent me people with MS. And I'd run into MS, I'd study it and all that kind of stuff, but I'd never actually been like, well, this is what I want to do. But they were the game changers for me, because I was so set on doing athletics and I was so set on working with athletes. And I was working with Olympic athletes. I was working with professional athletes. I was working with NCAA NFL draft picks, and I was putting their hips back together, their shoulders back together, their backs back together. Like, they sent them to me. So I was helping these guys potentially get these multi-million-dollar contracts. But then over here, I had these two women, one of which was 50 and the other one was 35. And they both had MS. They both struggled to walk. They both were just kind of in this hopeless place where it's like, I don't know how my life's going to turn out. The 35-year-old woman, like, she just had one child and she wanted to have another child. And she's like, I don't know if I'm even going to be able to be a mom. The older woman was like over 50 and she had actually just had her first grandkid. And she's like, I'm not going to be able to play with my grandkids. And so by doing what I was doing with professional athletes, I scaled it down and regressed it down so it became appropriate for those two women with MS. So these women came back in and they were like, oh my gosh, Trevor, guess what? Like, I played soccer with my son this weekend. And then a couple of months later, the 50-year-old woman came in and she's like, oh my gosh, like, I got down and I played Barbies with my granddaughter. Like, the amount of joy and the amount of hope and the amount of just emotional freedom that came with those women, and I saw in their eyes, I was like, this is who I want to work with. Like, I think it's great, the people that work with professional athletes and they can get them to do their thing and make their multi-million dollars and all that kind of stuff. Like, cool. Like, I'm a sports guy, have at it. But when there are real people, right, that we see all over the place that just want to be humans again, that just want to be moms and wives and volunteers and want to live their life, that's my calling. I was like, these are the people. And when I saw how hard they worked and how genuine their commitment was to the programs, I was like, this is it, right?
So how inspiring was that for you? And then how did that lead to you working with people all over the world with MS?
Yeah, it did something to my heart that it's a miracle. Like, I mean, in these two women, I found my calling. Like, I just knew that the same way that I was healed using movement that set me free from like really, really bad back pain. I'm like, I can use this same stuff to work with these women and set them free from these neurologic disturbances and bodies that don't move well and this muscle weakness and balance problems and all of it. And so because of the success that I had with those two, they started talking to their physicians. And the physicians contacted me. They're like, what are you doing? What's your approach? All that kind of stuff. So when I actually had a chance to speak with them and explain what I do and how I do it, they were like, this is awesome. Like, do you need more people? And of course you're like, well, heck yeah, right? So I started getting referrals from neurosurgeons, from neurologists, from physical therapy office, from chiropractors, and from physiatrists all across the northern part of Colorado, one of the states here. And it just kind of blew up, right? And so I started doing support group talks. I started being kind of like the exercise guy for people with MS. And then that spilled over to strokes. And then that spilled over to Parkinson's. And then that spilled over to working with some people with Lyme disease. Then that spilled over to working with vets with traumatic brain injuries. And so I got a lot of referrals, and it was fun because it was such a cool compliment for me because I got to work with physicians, I got to work with chiropractors, I got to work with physical therapists, and I became the continuum of care. Like, when people first got injured or hurt or diagnosed, they went through the medical system, which is amazing. But then once they were done with that, or their insurance ran out, or whatever it was, these medical professionals had full faith in me to send me their people, because they just kept getting these positive outcomes. And so it really grew. And I just fell in love with the population. I fell in love with kind of just the character of these people who are fighting for their lives, really, like fighting for their future, fighting for the quality of their life, not just the quantity of their life. Like, it was so genuine. It was so transparent. It was so organic. And I loved it. And what happened down the road is that at 33, I was diagnosed with chronic neurological Lyme disease, and my body started to fail, and I was getting spasticity in my legs. My hands were starting to get really weak, and I was I was doing manual release work on people, myofascial release, all this kind of stuff, staying in my scope, but still working with my hands. And I found I couldn't do things. My hands started to get weak. My eyesight started to fade. My feet started to get weak. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I went in and I got diagnosed with celiac disease. And I got diagnosed 2 months later, because I wasn't feeling any better, with Lyme. And my physician looked at me and he's like, bro, you got a bad case. And he's like, I'm gonna do what I can now, but we're gonna see how this plays out. And so, over the next few years, things just got worse. And I ended up going through 2 major flare-ups where I lost the use of my feet, and I was in bed for 5 to 6 days at a time. Like with massive pain, massive spasticity. I had to crawl to the bathroom. My hands were in spasm. My eyesight was like, my eyes just didn't work. Profound anxiety, profound cog fog, bladder incontinence. Like, I was like, what the heck is happening to me? So that was an interesting turn where it's like, I've been working with people for so long doing this, and from a educational and clinical standpoint, I knew how to approach it. But when you become the patient and you become the person that's dealing with it, it's like a whole different ballgame.
Now, I got to ask, when you started to have these symptoms, did you think you had multiple sclerosis?
I did. Yeah, I was like, do I have MS? Because I mean, I'm working with these people all the time. So your brain is like, I know too much. And so you start to get this like panic mode where you're like, oh my gosh, like, is this really happening? And so I did go in and I had lesions on my brainstem. And so uh it was kind of a mixed bag, like that, because I had the cofactors and the co-infections, they determined that it was Lyme disease, but my symptoms were presenting like that of someone with MS. And so I mean, at that point, I kind of had to overcome that crisis of belief and stop the panic cycle. And I remember having this moment where I was like, all right, man, you've done this with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people at this point. If you were your patient, you were your client, what would you say? What would you do? How would you start? And so I started diving into neurology. I started diving into like super deep studies of how the brain works, where movement comes from. And I started to apply the things that I had been doing with people for over a decade at that point to my own body. And I started getting better.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you a bit. Now, when you were diagnosed, did your physician at the time tell you how important exercise would be for you to recover?
Kinda. Like, he's like, you need to stay mobile. You should probably have a clean diet. Like, it was very general. Like, and so if there wasn't a lot of specifics, there was no resources at that time. Like we have now. There was no structured programs. There was no one really talking about this. It was just, well, let's see how you do. We'll put you on some low dose naltrexone. Like, I had my naturopath actually had me drink Lyme disease to like build up an immunity, like an inoculation to it, which I think kind of stopped the progression-ish, but I think it stopped the speed of it. But the infections and the neurologic disruption was definitely in my body. So they kind of were like, well, like we're wait and see. All right. And I'm like, but dude, like I've just lost the use of my feet. Like I couldn't walk for 5 days. There's something wrong here. And then you're telling me that I have lesions. I'm like, is this it? And it's like, well, we'll see how this progresses. So it was a wait and see. And I'm like, I can't deal with that. So I was like, nah, I went back to what I did in high school again. And I'm like, I'm going to take this back into my own hands. And I'm going to, if movement can heal me, then that's what I'm going to do.
So is that what you did? So, I mean, I'm so curious because this is the second time you've had a major health crisis. The second time you're saying, hey, it's up to me to turn this around for me. Like, what did you do? Was it the next day? Did you just get back in the gym? Was it a combination of getting in the gym and continuing to help others? Was there a nutritional change?
Yeah, all of the above, right? So, I mean, at that point, I had a newborn baby. My wife was at home with her. Like, I didn't have the option not to work. So, like, I kept training clients, and I would see a client, and then I would just have to like take 20 minutes and rest and recover. And in between clients, I would be doing mobilization drills. I'd be feeding movement into my feet. I'd be feeding movement into my hips. I'd be feeding movement into my shoulders, into my neck. And as I continued my studies, I ran into an educational pathway that really went into the depths of neurologic, like neurocentric brain-based movement training. And through that, I discovered that like doing like movement drills with your eyes, doing movement drills with your vestibular system, breath work, spinal reflex work, joint receptor work, that have high neurologic payoff, so that it wasn't so much get back in the gym and just go start crushing it and outwork outwork Lyme. It was get back in the gym, use those exercises that I was doing already, but how do I turn that into really specific targeted approaches and targeted methodology and programming to approach what was going on in my body? Because my lesions were in my brainstem, that's what I targeted first. And I learned that my spinal reflexes were being messed up and disrupted because that's where the lesions were. So my back pain was back. My core stability was trash. I was turning my ankles all the time. My midline stability was out of control weak. And so that's what I really started focusing on, because I wanted to upregulate the activity in my brainstem to work around the damage from the lesion sites. And I started to improve. So I would do like a set of like eye drills, Matt, and then I would do a set of vestibular drills, and then I would go deadlift. I would do some breath work, and then I would do some like wrist mobilization stuff, and then I would go bench press. So I started to incorporate the neurocentric aspects of things to get my brain to pay attention to the neurologic pathways before I would go and do a traditional lift. And it really started to connect the dots in my brain.
So you started to recover.
Exactly.
And what's your health like today?
I feel great. I mean, I'm 47 years old, man, and I'm doing more than I did when I was 25. Like, I'm deadlifting like 350 pounds 5 times. I'm doing box jumps. I'm sprinting again. I'm swimming hard in the pool again. I'm able to go out any time of day and walk. I live in Florida now, and I put on a weight vest and walk when it's 95 degrees and 80% humidity, and I don't care. Like, my body feels better. I'm playing with my kids. I'm able to keep up with them. Like, I feel good, and I will have threats of flare-ups every now and then if I let stress get me and I'm not nourishing myself well and I'm low on hydration and I'm not managing my cortisol levels and all that. But I feel amazing. I feel this is better than I felt in probably 20 years.
How did you transition to helping people with multiple sclerosis in the gym locally to helping people all over the world? How'd you go online? How did that work? Why did you do it? And what was the response?
As I was working with people in person, gosh, man, I mean, multiple times a week, people would be like, man, I wish I could find someone like you in Texas for my sister, or England for my grandma, or whatever, like China from my dad that's over there, or whatever else. Like, this is so good and I feel so much better and my life is vastly improved. Like, do you know anybody that does what you do here? And sadly, I had to be like, not really. Like, I've been so focused on my clients and so focused on building my clinic and all this kind of stuff. I was like, there has to be a way. And so I was introduced to online training, I don't know, sometime in that area when I had my own medical exercise facility, this guy named Ryan Lee, who was doing a lot of online training. I'm like, this is pretty cool. So I started using online training to recommend exercises for my in-person clients in between our training sessions. Because unless you're like rolling in finances, you're not going to be able to work out with me 6 days a week, right? It gets really expensive really quick. And so they were very grateful, and they're like, hey, would you mind if I sent these exercises to my sister, my brother, my dad, whatever? I'm like, sure, like, I don't care, like, go help them, And it got me thinking, and I'm like, man, I do feel limited. And I'm like, I was running out of time, to be real honest. It's like there was so many people, and my waiting list to get in to see me was so big, but I had this guilt. I was like, oh, like, I don't know how to do this, and I really don't have the time to train, 5 to 10 new trainers doing what I do. And so as I started investigating this world of online training, I was like, this is it. Like, if I can take what I do in person and create these programs, taking into account the full spectrum of mobility levels for people with neurologic conditions, chronic illness, disability, and all that, I think I can do this. I think this can be a global thing. I started talking to all my clients with MS, and they were like, oh my gosh, like, seriously, like, you need to do this, because there's a lot of great associations out there. There's, as there's multi-million-dollar associations out there and organizations out there, but all they were doing at that point was just giving you guidelines. There was no specific training. There was no specific program. There was no, here's a step 1 through 10 of what to do to actually start creating neuroplastic change and counteract your symptoms. It was like, well, you should walk, and you should do yoga, and you should stretch, and you should exercise. But what the heck does that mean? Unless you're a fitness professional, how are you going to put together a program like that? And at that moment, I was like, all right, God, send me. Like, I can do this. I know how to do this. And so I started online on Facebook. Like, nobody knew me, and I was still working 12 to 13 hours a day, and my wife and I would come in and we'd film Facebook content for almost a year straight. Like, no money, no nothing. I wasn't doing it for the money. I was just trying to get us out there to see what was going on. And I would get on Facebook and I'd post 2 or 3 exercises, and then on Saturdays I put them all together in this movement circuit, or this exercise circuit, and people started to find us. I knew what movement did for me. I knew how movement healed me. I had seen almost a decade and a half of people getting better through the power of movement neurology. And I'm like, the world needs this. There's people in other countries that don't have what we have in Canada and the United States that need this help, because they're just cast out and they're just like, there's nothing more we can do for you. Get out of here. And I was like, this is just not okay with me anymore. So there was this like holy discontent in my heart. And I'm like, this is what I need to do. And it's just been such a sweet witness to like watch all these people find hope again.
Now, multiple sclerosis can be a really unique disease in that, like, for each person, the symptoms can vary. They can be struggling with foot drop or other sorts of issues neurologically. Are there exercises that everyone can be doing, or is it more an individual program?
There are some fundamental movement patterns that I put into every single program in the MS gym. Like we need to, and there, it all comes down to we need to be able to dorsiflex and plantar flex our ankle. We need to be able to hinge our hips forward and back. We need to be able to stand in a vertical position and then, take a step forward. And like, what does that entail? What does that mean? Well, we have to train the fundamental movement patterns of the human movement system, which we all have built in us. And upon that foundation is then when we start to specialize and customize the program to meet the individual symptom profile. So in our programs inside the MS Gym, we have what are called core curriculum programs that target and that are designed to help people all the way from those that have to work out lying on their back in a mattress, all the way up to high mobility people like yourself and me that still want an awesome workout, but really want to still counteract our neurologic symptoms. So inside the MS Gym, I've taken my 25 years of experience and hundreds of thousands of dollars in education and my personal story and put those all together in this MS Gym canon of programming to where there are fundamental movement patterns that we train your brain to be able to do again. And then there's a way to customize your program to meet your needs. Like if you're someone with a foot drop, you need to be addressing the things that are going to stimulate, neurologic activity to help you dorsiflex, different than someone who's dealing with extensor spasticity or flexor spasticity in their arm, or someone that has a Lhermitte's in their neck, or MS hug or optic neuritis or whatever it might be. So because of my educational background, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of different cases. So there's stuff in the MS Gym that works specifically on your eyes, specifically on your vestibular system, specifically on your ankle, specifically on your spinal cord or your spinal reflexes to enhance the results of the fundamental core curriculum that we're focusing on to optimize your human movement system.
Now, foot drop is something that's a huge issue for so many people with multiple sclerosis. I get that question. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had that question. Have you seen positive results with people struggling with foot drop? And for someone who's being challenged with it right now, what can they do right now if they're watching this podcast? What's the next step they can make to helping themselves?
Why foot drop happens is there becomes a lack of activity in the neurologic patterns that feed the dorsiflexion in your foot that allow it to lift. And so we have to go in and figure out, like I've studied, and this is why I know, like there's certain patterns and there's certain areas of the brain that can be disrupted that will disrupt that dorsiflexion pattern that goes from your brain to your foot. And so working on someone with foot drop, it's not just about, let's just focus on a lot of dorsiflexion. You actually have to work on the muscles on the, if I hold up my leg, like you got to work on the muscles on the inside of your shin of your lower leg, the outside of your lower leg, the front of your shin, the back of your shin, and actually your hips and the opposite side of your trunk. Because what happens is that your brain starts to protect your body by shutting down that foot because the brain can't find the foot anymore. And the brain finds the foot through your kinetic chains going from your brain, through your spine, through your fascia, through your muscles, all the way down to the joint receptors in your ankle and your foot. And somewhere along the way, there's a disruption that happens because of demyelination or because of neurologic inflammation or whatever that might be. And so our approach that we start with is, number one, we got to get rid of the overactive signal, which is typically in the calves and the hip flexors. And so we do a lot of work. So if somebody's watching this and listening to this, one thing that you can do is get a myofascial tool, which could be a foam roller or a myofascial roller, like a rolling pin. You could get a lacrosse ball. You can even use your hands, if your hands are strong enough, to start releasing spasticity in your quadriceps, which are your thighs, and also your calves, which is the back of your leg. Once you start to do that, then we inhibit all the overactive muscles first. Then we go in and we stretch those overactive muscles. So you would go in and you would stretch your quadriceps, and then you would stretch your plantar flexors, which is the calf muscle. And you would get into what's called ballistic stretching, where you would go into a stretch, allow your brain to be like, am I comfortable in this stretched position? Hold it for 10 to 15 seconds and then come out of it to give the brain a break. Then we come back into it again. So we do multiple reps of dynamic stretching combined with a long static stretch of 1 to 2 minutes, in those muscles. So the muscles of the like, again, the quads and the muscles of the plantar flexors, those two muscles alone are an amazing place to start to reduce that hypertonic or that overactive signal that is being fed into your system out of protection for your body. Once you get rid of that hypertonicity or that sympathetic tone, then you can start working on the antagonistic or the opposite muscle groups that actually counteract the foot drop. That would be your hamstrings, your glutes, and then your anterior tibialis and your peroneal groups, which are in your lower leg. So you inhibit the muscle, the overactive muscle, you stretch the overactive muscle, and then you would work on strengthening your dorsiflexion through either assisted band, like you can use a resistance band or a belt or a towel to help you find assistance, like a spot, like on a bench press, to pull up on the towel while you try to lift your foot. That's going to help dorsiflexion. Moving your foot to the left and to the right, that's going to help with internal and external rotation on the ankle. And once the brain feels that it has stability laterally and it has stability front to back, a lot of times that signal, that threat response signal that creates the symptom starts to reduce. It starts to simmer down. It's not as important to the brain because the brain starts to regain confidence saying, hey, I can actually lift my foot. And hey, it is safe to lift my foot. And I can stabilize on the other leg so I'm not going to fall down and get injured, right? Does that make sense?
It does. If someone doesn't have drop foot, if they're struggling with a myriad of other neurological symptoms, should they have hope when they contact you, and why?
Absolutely. Like your body was meant to move. Like everything that we do as a human being is based on movement. The words coming out of my mouth right now are being formed from movement in the muscles that are in my pharynx, in my throat, right? Even the thoughts that I'm having right now as I'm speaking to Matthew, like all come from like recorded memories and recorded movements of previous conversations and me speaking this and educating. But this is all muscle memory, right? All of our words are muscle memory. Everything we say is muscle memory. Our language is muscle memory. And the thing is that even though your movement has been disrupted by a neurologic condition, it doesn't mean that it is lost, because inside your nervous system, you have contingency roads. I always describe this as if your main highway between your brain and your foot, we were just talking about foot drop, your brain and your foot is disrupted, there's frontage roads, there's side roads that are built in your body as emergency roads so that your brain can still connect to your foot. What we do inside the MS Gym and what I've spent my life developing the method for is allowing your brain to find those side roads, feel safe using those side roads, and then start to choose and develop those side roads through neuroplastic change. So once we start to use the roads on the side of the main highway that we used to always use because it's damaged, then the side roads become the preferred pathway. And then those neurologic pathways get thicker, they get faster, and so it sends signals down through those side roads faster, and those become the main highway. So they override the main highway that you once used, and then those become what your brain uses to communicate with your foot, with your feet. All right. So whether it's your feet, whether it's your hips, whether it's your spine, whether it's your abs, whether it's your neck, whether it's your upper body, the methodology is the same. Where things get precise and where things get specific is, well, what part of the brain do I need to access to get my hand to function versus get my foot to function? Is it the same? No, right? It's a different approach because there's different parts of the brain that stimulate the different functions of your body. And so that's what I've spent my life doing, is basically reverse engineering how movement happens in the MS pathology pathway, so that we can retrain the body to counteract that. So there are specific protocols that I have inside the MS Gym for foot drop, for hip flexor strength, for balance, like to get your balance back, to reduce spasticity, to start speaking well again, to get eyesight back, to start actually being able to use your head to improve vestibular function and balance. So there's an approach to everything. Like I tell my kids all the time, they come home with problems and all this, and I'm like, there's always a solution. You just need to be patient enough and have the focus enough to actually find what that solution is.
Now, when we're talking about solutions, oftentimes people with an illness or a chronic illness, they want the magic bullet. They want one thing that's going to take it all away. And from my perspective, and I think fitness and movement is so important. It's a major part of my program. But what other things do you also see for the people who've had the best recovery?
So our tagline inside the MS Gym is living a life by design, not by diagnosis, right? And I speak about all the time about developing a healing lifestyle, because movement is great. Movement, like you just said, it's amazing, but it's not a cure-all, right? Because if you have bad nutrition, if you have crappy supplements or no supplements, if you have poor hydration habits, if you are a stress ball, if you have hopelessness, if you're just mad and angry that you even have this disease and it's just like your enemy all the time, you're fighting an uphill battle. And so really, I believe healing, and I've from personal experience and from what I've seen the most successful MS Gym members do, is finding a rhythm with your body, like knowing when you can push and when you need to rest, knowing when you should try something new and when you need to just like fall back on the things that are already familiar to you, because you can't outwork this. And the thing is, until there's a cure, if there's ever a cure, like you and I can talk about that, like off camera, but like even if they came up with a cure tomorrow, there is still neurologic damage in your body that must be addressed, because it's not going to go away unless you train it out of your system. All right. And furthermore, you can train around it, but it may never actually fully go away. So you need nutritional support in order to heal, because your brain, if it's underfueled, if it's undernourished, if you don't breathe right and you're not getting proper oxygen and CO2 exchange, your brain is going to be underfueled. And no matter how hard you train, no matter how long you train, no matter how much or how the volume is, your brain is never going to be able to optimally learn, because it just doesn't have the nutrients and the fuel to do so. So nutrition is equally important as exercise. You owe it to yourself to hook up with a good physician or a naturopath or somebody who can actually do a nutrient profile on you, because if you're nutrient deficient, that's gonna slow your results. And I can tell you from personal experience, like stress, it will destroy you, right? Stress causes inflammation. Stress causes sympathetic overload, meaning your body goes into a fight or flight response instead of a rest and recover response. And stress is the number one thing that will set off my flare-ups. Like I've had to work tooth and nail alongside my movement practice to really figure out a good stress management lifestyle for myself, because if it starts to get too much, all of a sudden I will just get blindsided by symptom flare-ups. And I'm like, where the heck did this come from? And when I look at the previous 3 months, I'm like, oh, I didn't work on stress. I didn't work on sleep. I ate poorly. I made bad food decisions. I did not hydrate. I did not take my electrolytes, whatever it might be. So it's truly a lifestyle. It's not a compartmentalized magic bullet.
Working out every day or getting yourself to the gym is the hardest thing that I can do. It is the one thing that my brain, the moment I wake up, is already trying to convince myself not to do, and to rationalize why I shouldn't today and why I need to rest. And I have to overcome that mind on a daily basis. And by training myself to get into the gym, to be into movement, it has a ripple effect on all the other things I need to be disciplined in my life. What's your perspective on that, what you've seen?
Like half the time, to your point, it's just show up, right? Whether that is that if you're working out at home, like a lot of our members do, like I am vehemently passionate about, you need to have your space. You need to have your exercise space, that when you enter that space, that is what you're doing. Because if it's commingled with your office or your laundry room or your kids' playroom or whatever it is, then you bring the rest of your life in there. And a lot of times it becomes a stumbling block, because you're like, I don't want to enter this stress world. So it needs to be separate. People that go to the gym, basically, like the minute you step in the doors, you're already there. 9 times out of 10, you're not going to turn around and go back out to your car, because you already made the effort to get there. You already made the effort to get into your exercise room and be like, I'm here. What can I do? Right. And so a lot of people ask, well, I don't have any motivation. And what do I do for motivation? Well, you do it daily. You make it a daily habit that you must move, because movement is your medicine. Movement will help you heal, and movement will help feed your body and nourish your brain and fuel and activate your brain so that you can keep moving things in the right direction, right? So discipline is necessary to carry you through when your will and your mind cannot. Even if you show up on a day that you're not feeling great and you're like, you know what? I need to get this in today because I want to get this in today, and this is part of my program. If I could just do 10 minutes, that's a win. And we have a mantra in the MS gym. It's not all or nothing, it's all or something, right? If you can get something in and it's neurologically high payoff, you can still check it off for the day. You can still feel good about yourself and give yourself a high five, being like, yo, man, I didn't get my full workout today, but dude, I just did 5 minutes of core work that turned into 5 minutes of breath work. And I'm like, I actually feel better. Right? And so that discipline starts to create habits in your brain, and habits in your brain start to teach your brain to recognize the pattern of movement, and it's built to move, right? So either your habits are to move or your habits are not to move. And so if you build the habit of moving and your brain starts to crave that, then you know by experience and outcomes that the end result of a good workout, whether it's 10 minutes or it's an hour, is you feeling better. I'd have never walked out of a workout and been like, I really wish I had done that.
Awesome, Trevor. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And I want to personally congratulate you on the amazing work that you're doing, and to thank you on behalf of the MS Hope community for serving so many of us and for really helping people take their lives to the next level and find that light in the darkness of chronic illness. Thank you for you, and thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm honored to be on here with you, and I thank you for the work that you're doing too, man. Like, you're bringing hope to a lot of people, and I appreciate you being a warrior, standing in the gap for people, really fighting for the treatment that they deserve.
Thanks for joining us. Hope and Health is made possible through generous donations. To learn more or support the show, visit mshope.com, where you'll find free science-based resources.